not just that they're spending more time with their AI counterparts, but that they're getting more pleasure out of their interactions with their AI counterparts than they are with their human colleagues. So
That's
this
terrifying.
is,
Yeah.
and that's the inevitable path down which we're going to go, because what's the metric that they measure us all on is how much time do we spend on those platforms. If we get joy from the time that we spend in it, we'll spend more time in it.
Yeah. Paul, most people working in technology right now are focused on what AI can do. You've kind of spent years focused on what it can cost. What is the main thing people are not paying enough attention to?
Well, actually, when we think about what the costs associated with AI, there are interesting multiple costs, some of which are kind of documented and some of which are less well talked about. So the ones that are obviously talked about a lot are the cost of data centers, the cost of the environmental costs, things like that associated with the choices that we make around models, etc. But of course, there are elements of a human cost in here as well. And I'm not just, when I talk about human cost, I'm not necessarily just talking about the idea that AI on the edges right now is displacing some jobs and will and may well displace many more going forward. But I'm also talking about the cost in some cases to our quality of work, to the amount of time we are spending working. In my research, almost every knowledge worker that did unstructured, ambiguous work has reported instances where AI is extending their workday rather than shortening their workday. And there is some emerging evidence into things like the reverse Flynn effect and so on, which are looking at our ability to recall information, our ability to perform critical thinking. And for many of us who are using AI, I would suggest potentially suboptimally, it looks as though AI may be having an effect on some of those intelligence indicators as well. So there's a few costs in there, a few human costs in there. Now, of course, the costs have to be weighed against the benefits, and the benefits can be pretty multitude.
Sorry, you mentioned something there, the reverse Flynn effect.
The reverse Flynn effect, yeah.
I haven't heard of that before. Can you kind of explain what that is?
Sure. Yeah, so really in about, oh gosh, I think it dates back all the way to like the 1920s, something like that. Don't hold me on that. The people started looking fairly seriously at taking, in those days, just pure IQ figures. And there was an assumption prior to then that IQ was sort of a static thing. You just had it and it didn't change. It didn't just change over time. But then people started to look and see what was happening to those intelligence indicators over time. And for decades, it was later named the Flynn effect, by the way. But for decades, if you looked decade by decade, you would see across all societies a gradual raising of those intelligence indicators, until we got to round about the early noughties, and the sort of turn of the century, and then seemingly increasingly as we've got into the 2010s and early 2020s. And so then those intelligence indicators, which are now broader than just pure IQ indicators, started to decline. And again, it's not across all countries. There's not like one standardized test that is done. So the research is sort of coming through from different countries, but it appears to be pretty much a global increase in intelligence and now a global decrease in intelligence. Social media may be a factor. And it's possible that AI is a factor in that, due to a number of different things that that our relationship with AI causes us to think differently, behave differently, learn differently, all of those kind of things.
And is there any way we can counteract against that?
Well, the research...
Or do we need to?
Well, that's a good question. That's a very good... Well, let's start with the second part of that question, right? All of this is depending upon a point of view, right? There is some people, I do not subscribe to this, by the way, but some people have a kind of utilitarian view of this and say, well, we don't need to, because if you project this forward, right, and you say, pretty much everybody at some point has some kind of interface with technology at all times, so that they are technology augmented at all times, then it doesn't matter, in the same way that I can still find my way around a city if I've got a phone with a GPS without having to use my brain to make my way around the city. I could use that technology to enhance the areas where I myself am weakening. So as long as you have human plus technology at all times, then all of us could be as smart as Turing without knowing anything, right? So there is that utilitarian
Yeah.
view, right? I personally don't subscribe to that. And the reason I don't subscribe to that is because I have a view that humans have a unique form of intelligence that is quite different to artificial intelligence. And if we want to capture that, then we have to exercise our human brains. And so we will cease to do that the more dependent we become upon technology in a generalistic way versus the more specific way that we've used technology in the past. Now, the first part of your question was how do you how do you go about doing that? Again, the research on this is really early, but I can talk about what I observed in the research from my book, for example.
Yep.
And that was that we found that people who use AI in a very specific way, where they're emphasizing quality over efficiency and productivity,
Mm-hmm.
they get both, right? But they lead with quality versus leading with, with efficiency and productivity. And the humans that make time to ensure that they, as humans, unfettered by AI, are setting the creative direction of the work that they're doing beforehand. So I actually did this as an experiment when I wrote my book. The first stage is of writing the book. When I was planning a specific chapter or something along those lines, I would jump straight into AI and start with it. My writing sessions would start with me playing with AI, and then eventually I get on to writing. And then, having done that for about a month, I flipped, and I went from that to every time I started a writing session, I did nothing other than sit in a chair with a notepad and sketch down exactly what I was planning on accomplishing and framing out exactly what I wanted to accomplish in that writing session. And then I started writing. And the quality difference was very significant. In the case where I framed it out as a human first, I
Mm-hmm.
was achieving much higher quality. Interestingly, I was also getting more done. And because what my belief is, is because I primed my brain to be very engaged in the session versus, all right, AI, what are we going to do today?
Mm.
So as I say, that's purely anecdotal, but that's been my experience. Now, more broadly, as I say, in the folks that I spoke to for the book, people who had that overall approach where it's like, I'm in control. This is about quality. I'll use AI to help where I can, but I'm going to actively monitor and determine when I'm falling into the easy trap of
Mm.
letting AI run everything, and counteract that. That's going to be very important. And moving forward, of course, as we get into agentic workflows, that's going to be even more important for humans to think about here, right? We need to think. There's a lot of talk right now of humans in the loop.
Yep.
We also need to think about humans in control, which is separate and different from just humans in the loop.
Yeah. I like to focus on the point of agentic AI. We myself and Gerjan talked about this in a previous episode. We talked about OpenClaw
Yeah.
and the absolute insanity that is OpenClaw when you and what people have done with it. And when you have people who are in senior roles at tech companies and they're having to physically pull the plug on their
Yep.
OpenClaw device because it started deleting emails,
Yep.
that should set off alarm bells ringing in people's heads
Oh,
straight away.
100%.
And like, we I don't know if we've always had that phrase FOMO. I've got the phrase AI FOMO because
Oh,
it
100%.
just is insanity. Common sense just is not very common in when it comes to AI, in my opinion. And
do first, think later.
exactly, yeah. But I love what Paul was saying about how we should, and I'm starting to do with my own kind of writing on LinkedIn as well. I have been quite dependent on AI, but now I'm kind of thinking, do I, go away, do my first draft myself, and then I might need to enhance it or, tweak it. And a previous guest of ours, we talked about this, that the idea has to come from a human. Otherwise it is AI slop. But if the original thought starts with a human, then that's the key difference between just AI generated nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's elements of habit formation that we should think about in this as well, right? I mean, with the interesting thing about human habits is we talk a lot, about, oh, it takes a month to, or 3 months to embed a habit. And that's sort of true, but it's also
I've got
sort of
Atomic
not.
Habits lying around here
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. Yeah. But it's sort of true, but it's sort of not true, right? I mean, the reality is that um what we do as humans is we do the thing that's easiest. So if you give me, brush your teeth, right? It's easier to brush your teeth for 30 seconds than it is to brush your teeth for a couple of minutes. So what happens? Most of us fall into the habit of brushing our teeth for 30 seconds rather than brushing our teeth for 3 minutes. In the case of interacting with AI, once you brought AI into this picture, and particularly once you brought this form of conversational AI, which is, I hope a passing fad, that this is going to be the human computer interface, this sort of continuous conversation thing. But once you do, right, and it becomes your companion, I mean, how easy is it for a human to kind of take a back seat when the AI is literally saying to you, hey, I just did this. Do you want me to build a chart for you on that now? Do you want me to build a nice little presentation for you on that? I'm right here. I can do anything you want, right?
Yeah.
And so what we found was that, you know, this is the heart of why it's easier to slip into bad habits than it is to slip into good habits, because the bad habits are easier to do, right? So now we're in this thing where we have a choice, which is to press the easy button, which is like, oh, AI do this, AI will do that, or press the hard button, which involves us working harder. And we're gonna choose the easy button unless we're super, super conscious about choosing the hard button. So when I work with people, I actually advise them to spend, at least a couple of minutes every day. They can even get AI to help them with this, right? But to spend at least a couple of minutes each day reflecting not just on what they got accomplished, but reflecting on how they accomplished it, and reflecting when they lent on AI because it was easy versus lent on AI because it was the right choice.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can't remember where I read this. It was it was an article. I think it might have been the New Yorker or something like that. But it was talking about people, and they were at parties, and they left the parties to go and check on the output of an AI project.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
But
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
It's like if I'm out and I'm, having fun, having, talking with my friends and stuff, that's the last thing I care about, whatever an AI is doing. And maybe that's a generational thing because,
It might be, but James, we're primed. We're already primed to do it if you think about it, from our phones and social and stuff like that. I mean, I was at a baseball game the other day, and we cue jokes about baseball being boring, but I was at a baseball game the other.
You left it open.
Yeah. I like baseball, but anyway, I was at a baseball game the other day, and I'm behind home plate. So, which for people who are not familiar with baseball is like from a viewing experience, is literally the best experience you can have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 6 rows back, So perfect. And then I'm looking at the two rows that are in front of me, and in the middle of the game, I would say that 90% of the people were scrolling through social media on their phones. They paid significant amounts of money to go to this baseball game, and then they were not aware of what was happening in the baseball game. Instead, they were on, Insta or whatever service of choice. And we're flipping towards a point whereby it's going to be less of that and more checking in with your, AI agents to see who they are. And a lot of us, I've done this myself because it's just easier to manage them. But a lot of us are, if we're setting up bots on Telegram to communicate with AI agents, we're personifying those bots, right? So that we can, we'll say, hey, I'll ask, Bob this one and Katie that one. And we've now got this sort of like team of people that are working for us. They're working 24 hours a day. We're going to want to check in with them. And so we do. And we spend our time doing that. And in many cases, again, saw this in the research for the book, people are reporting not just that they're spending more time with their AI counterparts, but that they're getting more pleasure out of their interactions with their AI counterparts than they are with their human colleagues. So
That's
this
terrifying.
is, yeah. And that's the inevitable path down which we're going to go, because what's the metric that they measure us all on is how much time do we spend on those platforms. If we get joy from the time that we spend in it, we'll spend more time in it.
Yeah, no, I remember when ChatGPT changed some of the models a while back. I think it was version 4, I think.
Yeah,
And
4.0.
there was what?
4.0 went offline and everybody was
4.0,
on the fence.
Yeah, people were like, I've lost a friend, and I'm like, I hope that's a joke. Like that can't be seriously what you're, and this gets into the whole AI psychosis thing that is just terrifying. And we could potentially have AI religions at some point. You can go off. We could go off on it, and I don't want to, but it's good to be aware of the downsides of this kind of stuff, is because yes, it's super helpful, but at the moment it's a machine that you interact with and you define the boundaries, and I think that's critical. Well, that's my view.
Or you need to. Yes, it's very important that you do, and you may not, and you may not be aware that you're not. So that's what hopefully we can, if people are listening today and they reevaluate anything, I'd suggest that one of the first things they reevaluate is like, do I have a healthy relationship with AI? For folks that haven't seen it, I still think the sycophancy episode of South Park is very worth seeing. I mean, it's close to a year old now, and things move very, very fast in this world. But it is still,
I haven't seen that episode.
the fundamental themes in it are very important.
Okay, the one I've been referring to quite, and it's become almost like a documentary, is Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like you're looking at episodes of that, which is a comedy TV show, and you're going, "Oh my god, they were so on the nose."
Yeah. But in the sycophancy episode, there Kyle's father is using AI to kind of reignite his business, and of course, and every stupid suggestion that he comes up with, ChatGPT is like, that sounds like a great idea. Let's build a business around that. And then things get progressively worse and worse, and the relationship with his wife is struggling because of it. So he sat in bed talking to AI about how he can improve that.
Oh, I have seen it. I've seen a clip of that. Yeah, I've definitely seen a clip of that somewhere. But I'm going to go watch the full episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely think that's something we really need to keep an eye on. So, Paul, just to kind of focus a bit more on your work around humans and technology. So, you are now the principal AI technologist at Adobe. You were at Microsoft for over 10 years. You've trained people on technology all the way back to the early desktop era. So you've kind of looked at what humans are doing with technology. So are there any patterns that you keep seeing that repeat themselves?
Yes, definitely. So, and just to give people an idea of sort of the exact timeframes involved here, my career in tech began literally as computers were arriving on people's desktops in the workplace. Right. So, in fact, my very first job out of college, as a I had to grow a beard for it because I was so young, and they were they were much older than me, and they're like, who's this whippersnapper telling us what to do? But my very first job was to get people in training rooms and teach them how to use this brand new thing called a PC. And it had arrived overnight, pretty much. I would say on their desk, but they were too big, so they were under their desk.
Yeah.
And so these computers that had arrived, and in fact, everything that has gone since has come from this one realization. These computers that had arrived represented something much bigger to those people, to those individuals, than simply the technology itself. What was typically happening back in those days is that as those arrived, their managers would say, "Hey, I've got good news and bad news," right? The good news is that you've got this amazing new piece of technology that you'll be able to do all of these various different things with. The bad news is that we've got rid of your administrative assistant, and now you're going to have to do a bunch of stuff that you never had to do before, right? and um, and so what was really fascinating was, I think, like week 1 or week 2, I was speaking to a group of maybe sort of 50 something senior people in a company who didn't know how to use, a keyboard and a mouse or any of that kind of stuff. In some cases it was DOS, in some cases it was Windows 3.1, and they were crying. Right, this guy was like going, "I'm never going to get this. My career is over." And I remember distinctly like it was yesterday. I went back into sort of like our rec room in the break, and I explained what had gone on. I said, "There's a guy in there crying." And one of the more veteran trainers said to me, "Oh yeah, you've had your first crier, huh?" And we referred to them almost like ER doctors call, people who kind of cold-bloodedly call people who come in with, severed arteries or whatever they call them, the bleeder, right? These were our criers, and they were regular, right? So what I realized back then, and I have realized in pretty much all the work that I've done since, is that when new transformative technology comes into play, there is a very significant and rarely talked about human toll associated with the technology that comes in. And it relates to kind of deep seated human traits around fear of change and uncertainty and wanting stability and security and all of that kind of stuff. So there's been an element of that with every wave of technology that we have had. And this change is no different, except to say that this term, you guys probably know the term FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yep.
The FUD with AI is not just a one-off event. The FUD with AI is continuous and evolving, right? Because AI itself is continuous and evolving, right? The AI we're using today is very different than the AI we used 2 months ago. The AI we'll be using in a month is going to be very different again. We can't even project, right? I mean, I'm in this field. I did not project the widespread use of LLMs. I did not project the widespread shift towards an agentic model. And I've got some ideas as to what's coming next, but I'll probably be wrong about those too. So
yeah, you're not the only one. We made some predictions last year, and what do we get? 75% right, some stuff.
That's pretty good.
We didn't have AI browsers. We'd no concept of an AI browser coming.
No idea that they would be this huge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's pretty good. So the FUD is evolving.
Yeah.
But it's very real. I will say one thing that I think is possibly unique possibly, is that I think this is one of the first times where I've seen the greatest human resistance from the youngest in society. That is a trend that is just starting to really emerge. And you guys might have seen there's been some protests on
Yeah.
campuses. Eric Schmidt the other day mentioned AI, got roundly booed. And this is real, right? Before I joined Adobe, I worked on a program of AI readiness for early in career professionals, and I'd done one for like middle managers before. And as part of the programs that we build, we measure sentiment, and the hostility towards AI among early in career professionals, people just coming out of college, was high and real. So that I think is somewhat different in terms of the relationship between the humans and the technology that they use.
Is that because what they keep reading is that AI is essentially going to get rid of entry level positions and, junior roles won't be needed, so they're fearful for their future?
It's part of it. I also think that there's a natural tendency in younger people to want to have kind of a linear career path. And the idea of linear career paths has been
What?
kind of
What?
yeah,
What? Yeah, no.
yeah, it's been kind of
Hmm.
it's been kind of dying for a long time, but you at least want you want the dream of it, right? Because
Yeah.
that just you can make sense of your life if you
Mm.
project forward and say I'm here now and I want to be here then, right? It's very difficult. And again, this comes back to sort of like base human reactions. If I say to you, yeah, whatever you're doing, it's not going to make any difference. You're probably going to lose your job like 5, 6 times. I don't know how you're going to make money. You're going to have to figure that out later on. And good luck, kid. I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't. It's not exactly. It doesn't exactly feel great. And of course, a lot of those have grown up through a period of immense economic uncertainty. They've seen that economic uncertainty, and now, as we project forward, all they see is more of the same and probably worse. So that. I mean, you have to empathize with that, because I mean, after all, if one of them came to me and said, "Solve that for me," I can't.
Mm.
And do you see the impact of the AI acceptance in the older generations
Yeah, so
is much
that's
higher? So they're not that scared for that.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things with the older generation. So one is that if you've been in the workforce for like 20, 25 years, um, you've seen various waves, of technology, and you've kind of muddled through them all before. Um, Also, the older generation, most of us, right? I mean, like I spend literally every day immersed in this stuff. Most people have don't really have that top 10% level of knowledge or 20% level of knowledge to see where this is going and see what the potential impacts of it are. So, to be honest, some of the lack of fear associated with the older generation is actually also based on the fact that the power that they see at the very top end of this, they're not really seeing yet, right? So I think there's an element of
The
that,
lack of
but
understanding.
lack of understanding, yeah. But I will also say that as you go through each generation, there is a kind of like different people have different things about AI that attract them to it. In fact, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day who was pointing out that they had elderly relatives who are using AI to create silly birthday videos for their grandkids, right? And for them, it's like, oh, this is a super cool toy. And I don't really have to learn anything in order to be able to use it. So as you get towards the older generations, the lack of a learning curve because of the conversational interface, the lack of a learning curve to be able to do something vaguely fun is very, very appealing. So as you work through different ages, everybody has a slightly subtly different relationship with AI based on lived experience and based on how they use it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and it's interesting to hear that perspective about kind of the younger generations and that kind of pushback. So, Paul, you published an article, I think it was last October,
Yeah.
about kind of safeguards to a human-centric AI future. Can you just kind of briefly go into like the kind of the high level message from those kind of safeguards?
Yeah, and I guess I'll start with the fact that almost as to sort of like why I went about doing this and what the purpose of it was. So I've spent a lot of time in and around. You mentioned I spent 10 years at Microsoft, and that 10 years overlapped when they produced their first incarnation of their guidelines for responsible AI.
Mhm.
And I've spent a lot of time in and around those guidelines, and some of them are done at a societal level. The European Union have a set of guidelines, for example, and many of them have been done by the AI companies themselves, and they serve a good purpose, right? The purpose is of them is to try to ensure that this immensely powerful technology is deployed in some way that is vaguely responsible. And every so often, elements of this have happened at ChatGPT and so on. You have the guidelines come up against a set of business decisions that are being made. And then that's kind of when the rubber meets the road, right? Where do you go when the business imperative is to do X, and and what your guideline says indicates that you should do Y, and the guideline doesn't always win. So that's something we have to be fairly careful about. Now, that all of that said, when I looked at the stuff at the European Union level, when I looked at the stuff at the individual company level, I observed what I thought was a gap, which is that you can see the imprint of political imperatives, as in, which I'll loosely call "we must keep up with China," and and company imperatives, which I would call "we must make money," right? You can see the imprint of those on there, but a lack of we must keep we must make sure that humans can thrive in this world that is becoming increasingly AI dominated. It depresses me a little, for example, when I see an AI company, of which now there have been multiple announcements like this. I see an AI company saying, oh, X number of white collar jobs or all white collar jobs will be irrelevant in pick your time frame. Right. And
yeah, there was a pretty
and
high level person who did that as well. So
precisely, yeah.
And they said it in 18 months, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry, but that's not happening.
Right. And my point is that, well, I think there are real reasons why they're saying those things.
Oh, I know why the reasons are. It's how much that company has invested in the technology, and that's, I'm a complete cynic when it comes to this stuff when I hear this kind of nonsense coming out of them, because it is essentially they're looking after themselves and their shareholders. But
yes,
we all know, we've seen the numbers. They're astronomical, and they have to justify this stuff. We all know things like, the various different tools. They're not selling the way they should, or the way they want them to. So we get these kind of decisions that we've had with several companies this week about all of these kind of, we're cutting, like, I think they cut most departments and AI engineering, nothing. It's like,
yeah, precisely. And so the point about all of that is that you see that, right? And you see those types of announcements, and then that's where they stop. Now, when you think about it, what would a rational human being do, right? Forget about the economic imperative. What a rational human being might do is they might say, if they believed it, which I don't believe they do actually, but if they believed it, that like all white collar jobs were going to be irrelevant, right? That's across the world. That's hundreds of millions of people out of work, out of stroke. You might have them go, hundreds of millions of people are going to lose their job in 18 months. We should probably do something about that. Right. Or maybe we should slow down, or maybe we should do something different, or maybe we're going in the wrong direction. And so what I wanted to capture from my principles was a view of this that started from the concept of we need a world in which this technology can thrive and humans can thrive alongside it. And so that was kind of like the purpose of it, as it were.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I agree with what you said about that, about how we just kind of miss that whole thing about the human element and how we need to thrive just as much as the technology. So, you know, you in these kind of safeguards, you talk about AI is fragmenting society, and this is already happening. But what can someone actually do about this?
Yeah. So, yeah, and this actually is one of the larger. This is one of the larger questions that I tried to put out there as part of the safeguards, which is in some cases people are going to feel like there's nothing that they can do as an individual, and in other cases hopefully they will feel that they can. In the case of fragmenting society, it's actually a very good one to think about this, right? Because you can work your way from society all the way down to individual level, and you can see things that people can potentially do. I'll start with the individual level because that's where you started.
Yeah.
I think it's extremely important for us as individuals to not just make a statement along those lines that, hey, society is very fragmented, but understand and acknowledge their own role in that. So their own role in that, in terms of, we come back to this idea of effort and what humans do naturally, right? If I'm consuming all of my media through feeds that are optimized for me and my biases, which most of us are, right? It's just, I've got my feed set up on this, and they all now have the "for you" thing, where the algorithm, whether they explicitly state, at least X
that's a
explicitly
dumpster
states
fire
it.
on a certain platform. So
Yeah, but at least X explicitly states it. The other ones, a lot of the other ones hide it, right?
Yeah.
So, but you can, but the algorithm is like, you're like this, you're going to get more of this and more of this and more of this and more of this and more of this, and that impacts. And when it comes to our own personal biases, we don't just get biases because of what we see, we get biases because of what we don't see, right? The editorial choices that are being made by an algorithm, or even if we tune into traditional news or anything along those lines, those editorial choices affect what we consume. And AI is supercharging that. AI is making it better to isolate you as an individual, but as it's doing it, you are embedding yourself in a tribe, and you have to understand what that tribe is. So just as an individual, the effort that you make, some of it's easy, some of it's difficult. The effort you make is, I don't know, go back to more traditional news stories, turn the radio on and listen to the radio for a bit. You'll at least hear something that you didn't intend to hear, right? That wasn't carefully curated for you. Do that. Go to, seek out physical places. There is a bunch more diversity in physical places with physical communication and collaboration, meetups, things like that, where you're going to hear voices that challenge you. If you are not regularly challenged on a regular basis, that tells you not that you're right. It tells you that you've become so isolated that you're hearing nothing.
You're in an echo chamber.
Nothing else. You're in an echo chamber. And the point is that at this point, almost all of us are in an echo chamber. Without getting political, I know I no longer live in the UK, but when Brexit happened, there were many groups of people that I spoke to who were on one side or the other side, who had never spoken to another human being who was on the opposite side of the debate to them. And so this is why, when it happened, it was such a massive shock, because all the people, like the Remainers, were utterly convinced that it would be Remain, because they never met a Leaver. right? So this is sort of of an example, and I think people think of it at very high level political levels, but it's way more than that. We're being fragmented in every single way, and micro targeting of us, we're submitting to that, and it's causing our society to become incredibly fragmented. And we can put a bit of effort in as human beings to acknowledge it, understand it, and seek out opposing viewpoints. I try to go through every single day having my viewpoint challenged at least once.
That's a really good point. So, just to wrap up, Paul, what is the one thing you would like people to go away and do differently when it comes to AI going forward?
So I think that there's going to be a future. We're not there yet. There's going to be a future where, if this goes well, AI will speed everything up so that we can slow down as humans. And right now, I'm there's more guilty on this than anybody, because it's literally my job to stay on top of all of these things. And I've got, feeds to help me accomplish that, and agents to help me accomplish that, and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that if you're in the world of AI, even if you're quite technically involved in the world of AI, stop, pause a little bit, try to understand what is necessary for you to thrive as a human being within AI, and stop trying to chase the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, because otherwise you'll just be a mediocre at all of them. Right? So understand your role in it. Slow down, focus on being really good at that, and focus on understanding how to embed AI effectively in your workflow. Focus on how to make sure that AI is actually making you better at your job, versus you just becoming an expert on what this model is and what that model is and what the next shiny new thing is. There's a real reason for that, which is that this rate of change is only going to increase. So if you're struggling with it right now, then you're going to struggle with it more next month and the month after that. So you have to have a fundamentally different approach. And then the last thing I would say is, a day a week, just switch it off and be a human. Right.
Yeah.
Remember what it is to be a human. And if you do remember what it is to be a human, you will be a human that works better with AI as a result.
And when you're off, try fixing something for yourself instead of asking AI.
Precisely.
Perfect. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the Impact of AI Explored. We'll see everyone on the next episode. Thank you very much.